Yeah, well, getting back to kind of what we were talking about before, yes, I believe the artist's individual sound is very important. Their unique sound is very important. When you're talking about independent artists, especially guys who are just trying to get their career started or just do something to see if they can even start a career, period, in music, they don't really have the resources to go out and do a proper tour. The best they can hope for at this point is to be able to put their music up onto free streaming websites and hopefully promote themselves to potential listeners. But when you do that, you're putting yourself out there within 100,000 or more other people who are all in the same genre. What are you going to do to make yourself stand out when all you got is just your sound? Because you just have people listening to you. They're not coming to shows watching you perform. They're not necessarily hearing about you from other major publications or commercial radio or anything like that. It's just your music with nothing more than maybe a picture to go with it. The only thing you do is just, you gotta sound different than everybody else. And, case in point, look at any major music artist in the business today. Whether it be hip hop, pop, rock, blues, jazz, whatever it is. Beyonce doesn't sound like Lady Gaga, doesn't sound like Madonna, doesn't sound like J-Lo, Metallica doesn't sound like Megadeth, doesn't sound like Anthrax, doesn't sound like Judas Priest or Slayer or Iron Maiden. They're all different, and if you talk to any A&R executives, they're telling you what they're looking for is people, artists, or groups that sound different. That doesn't mean you're taking Weird Al or one of the Zappa kids and turning them into a pop star or whatever. That just means that you have somebody that's working within a genre or a subgenre, and there's something about them, how they perform, how they play, how they compose their music, the type of gear they use to get a certain kind of sound that they like, that sounds different from anybody else. That's what the A&R guys are looking for. Say I'm an average listener, and let's stick to rock or metal because that's kind of where I'm at. I go to a streaming radio station, or just any kind of streaming station, and I'm looking for something that plays the kind of music I like. Okay? And within that genre of music, there are favorite bands that I have. And I'm hoping, I hear some of those bands when I'm listening. Yeah, that's cool, great. Let's say now we're switching over to something that's not so mainstream. They're playing a lot more stuff that's not necessarily as well known as more commercialized streaming stations are. But I'm getting bands in there that sound like my favorite bands. It's like the first one comes up, hey, this is cool. Yeah, that sounds really good. They sound just like blah, 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 blah. Right there is a problem, right to start with. They sound like. Yeah, it's cool and everything, they sound great and everything, but I'm comparing them now to somebody else. My favorite band or whatever it is, that's already been established, that I'm well aware of, that's been there for a long time. I'm comparing these guys to these guys because they sound just alike. Now the next band comes on. Hey, you know, that's not bad either. It sounds just, this all sounds like my favorite band. And then the next one comes on. Next one comes on. Before too long, I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of just losing interest of really just paying attention to it. It's turning into more background noise. And then by the time you know it, 20 or 4 or 30 other bands go by, and you don't even know who they were or what songs they played or anything, because it really didn't catch your ear. It really didn't catch your attention. None of them stood out because they were all the same. They had the same sound. They sounded like they played the same. They sounded like they had the same guitars. They sounded like they had the same drums, and the vocalists were all singing the same way. They all sounded great, but they all sounded the same. They could have been completely interchangeable, and I never would have known the difference, unless I was sitting there actively watching which band was coming up, what song or whatnot. That in itself is where I believe lies the problem for a lot of independent artists. They're wanting to sound great, but they're wanting to sound like their favorite people or whatever they listen to because they think that's what sounds good. And it does sound good, but they're just going to get lost within everything else that's out there, with everybody else who's doing the exact same thing. And when it comes to the artist-engineer relationship, the engineer's job is basically to do what the artist wants to make them happy. The artist, though, should really take the time to develop their own sound, develop their own style, instead of just trying to copy somebody else's. But the problem is that so many people just do try to copy. Now, if they're copying and they come into the studio and that's what it is, then fine. You do your job as the engineer and producer or whatever, and you make them sound good for what they have or what they want to do. But if you're the engineer and they're coming in and they're doing all this stuff, and then you're going in and using the same tactics that you use for everybody else, so that they all come out sounding just like the favorite band, but they also sound like just like everybody else you've ever done any work with in that genre, you're creating the problem. And you're not helping them. I guess the best example I can give you about this is one I was personally involved in. A few years ago, these kids came up to me asking me to record their demo, for a one-track demo for the first album they were ever going to put out. And when I say kids, they were about 16 to 20 years old, ran that age range. And for the most of them never even played in a band before. They all just did the stuff in their homes, in their bedroom, just playing around. That was that. They never even recorded before, really. They never did any of this stuff before. I figured, sure, what the hell. I'll help them out. So they asked me to come to their place. I pack up my gear, and I go to where they're rehearsing. Turns out I walk into what was like a 3,000 square foot basement. Basically, this thing would have been the envy of pretty much any major studio's echo chamber. But, I'm looking at it, okay, I can make this work. And here they are, stuck in a little corner over in the side. Well, they play their track for me. Turns out they're a metalcore band. And, I'm like, yeah, I can get it all done. I'm thinking, if we just set them all up and record the whole thing live, we can get it tracked and done with in just a couple hours, and we're out and good to go. I can get it all mixed, and everything's going to be done. These guys are going to be on their way to do whatever they're looking to do. I talked to them, asked them how they want to go about things. Well, they don't want to do it live for whatever reason. They want to track everything individually, one person at a time, and they want to stay in their little corner. Alright, fine. So I set up mics to get everything to sound good. We choose which kind of guitar cabinets actually have the best sounding speakers, and we set up the microphones in the position that's going to give them the right kind of tonal quality they're looking for, or something not too dark, not too bright. And we just go through the process. Each person comes up to do their part, and we have rehearsed it a couple times with the click track, because none of them ever played to a click before, and they're not used to playing alone, but this is really how they wanted to do it. Anyways, it took 10 hours. 10 hours for these guys to get through one song that wasn't even 4 minutes long. I took it home, and over the course of the week, I spent about 2-3 hours a night listening to it, editing it, and mixing it. You know, this track was the only track that I've had to do so much extensive editing on, because just no matter what we did, with the lack of experience for these kids, no matter how many times we did a punch in, no matter how many times we rehearsed it, they would always screw something up. But yet when they played together live, which they were accustomed to, they played fine. So the biggest issue were the drums. This is a metalcore band. The drum kit is set up like it's for jazz. Open toms, big raspy snare, and a really poofy, booming kick drum. I can make everything else sound good, but the kick drum itself didn't have the right kind of sound that was needed to punch through the guitars in this kind of music. There was no clicky attack that you would normally hear. And the low end poof, boom, wasn't good enough to just be there by itself. It just kind of got blended and buried away without having the rest of that there. So this would be the point at which some other studio would just replace what they had with MIDI drums from Drumagog or whatever, something like that. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I just ran their drum track, their click track, not their click track, I ran their kick track through a couple different channels, ran a few different filters on them, ran a few different processors for dynamics on them, and I made those channels create a click sound that followed right with the actual drummer's performance. The way he hit the drum, how much force, speed, dynamics, everything, all that, whatever you want to call it, it followed perfectly because it was just being fed right from his actual drum. And since it was from his drum, it also worked within the overtones that his drum created. So it wasn't like I was throwing in two different drum sounds, like just a click or from something else and his drum or whatever. And I suppose maybe that really doesn't matter to most people out there, but to somebody like me, it does. This is kind of important. It's his sound. It's everything is his. The only other thing I did with him, as far as editing goes, is he had a lot of parts where he didn't hit the snare right. He just too soft or off to the side of it. It just didn't have the right sound when you hear the rest of the composition or the rest of his playing. So there were certain sections that I did have to copy and paste different drum hits, different snare hits into place so that it actually sounded right for their competition. Because again, no matter how many times we worked it, no matter how many times we recorded it, there would always be points at which the kids just fucked up. So we did that. Now the guitars. The guitars were not set up for the tuning. Tuning was way too low, and the guitars suffered problems from intonation issues and just the fact that really flabby string. You hit the string too hard and it just has that wow effect, okay? We're going to take care of the intonation issues as necessary, and when it came to actually having to mix the stereo guitar tracks together with the bass and the keyboards, there did require some pitch correction to get them all lined up, so it just wasn't this big washed out mess. Clean vocal track was the same way. I ran through Auto-Tune, but I set the Auto-Tune up so mild that it had absolutely no effect from his transitions from one note to the next, and all it did was just bring his tone, his pitch where it should be, while still leaving all the vibrato without sounding digitized, like a computer would sound, like all the auto-tune shit that I can pick up on when I'm hearing other songs on the radio. It still sounds natural, but it's now within the right pitch. And after I got all that done, that's when I just mixed it, got it all sounding really great, mastered it, gave it to the guys, and they were really happy because they were ecstatic. This thing sounded great. It was different sounding from anything else that was out there for metalcore. It was really punchy. The guitars were crunchy and loud. The drums were heavy hitting. So they started sharing it with their friends. And they started uploading it to streaming sites on like YouTube, online, things like that. And kind of hyping it up, pushing it, whatever. And it was getting some plays. It was doing all right. And then they uploaded it to a competition site. It was a competition site being put on by Warped Tour for spots to play and tour around with Warped Tour. Their tracks started getting hyped. Not just from friends or people they were telling, hey, listen to this. The people who were going on there to rate the songs, listen to the songs, review them, things like that, they were actually getting into this. And they were saying, hey, we like this. We're going to push this up higher. This is great. Give it whatever, however the rating system is, 5 stars or 10 out of 10 or whatever. Yeah, this is great. Click it up. By the end of the competition, the guys didn't win, but by the end of the competition, they made it to number 14 out of everybody else that was there in the competition. Out of tens of thousands of other bands. These guys went from the basement, never playing in a band or a show before, to almost playing a national tour with a bunch of other well-known acts, or semi-well-known, with just that one demo track that I helped them to produce. They were this close to going on a national tour before they even released an album. Well, they had some other friends that were in their own metal bands, and those guys, they told them, hey, why don't you go use our guys that we go to record all our stuff down south there. He'll give you a better recording. He'll do a better sound. If you would have had him to start with, you would have won that competition. Yeah, so go down there. And, admittedly, their friends, they sound great. They sound just like their favorite bands. They sound just like everybody else this guy has ever recorded in that genre. But they sound great. Honestly, they sound good. So the guys go there. They stay for a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, and they do all their tracks. They lay down all their tracks, they record every song, and they come home. 4 months later, they get them back, and not long after, I'm getting a message saying, hey, will you listen to this? Okay, I'll do that. Click on it, listen to the link, and I'm listening. Oh my god, it sounds like fucking crap. What the hell happened? The drums were really weak and thin sounding, no really power to them at all. The guitars were just a complete washed mess. Vocals were way in the back, and the keyboards were virtually non-existent. This is not what this guy they went to is putting out for everybody else. What the hell happened? So I asked him point blank, what happened? And the response I get back was, we told them to do everything like you did, and how we worked with you, and this is what we got, and blah, blah, blah. What do we do? It's like, oh, God, okay. Well, first of all, they went to somebody who apparently doesn't know how to mix real drums or to deal with real guitars that are not set up right or any of that stuff. He's just used to MIDI replacement and all that other little cheap technology that's out there. Okay? I told him, well, look, there's nothing I can do for you, obviously, so you got to tell him he's got to fix this. This ain't going to be cut good enough. It's not going to cut. So that's what they did. They got it back home and said, we don't accept this. We don't like this. You fix it. 2 months go by, and they get the new mixes back. Now they sound great. They sound really good. All polished up, clean. But it ain't the same performance. It's either not the same record that they did, or there's been a lot of different work done to it. Now they sound just like their friends. Now they sound like everybody else this guy has done in this genre. Now they sound just like the favorite bands that are on major radio streaming programs or on commercial or radio or whatever. How the hell did he do it, right? Well, like I said, either it's all been re-recorded with somebody else because the drums sounded different, the guitars sounded different, or you just went through and edited everything with all that cheap technology that I mentioned before. Drums were edited out and replaced with something off of Drumagog or something or some other similar program. Everything was time-aligned with a plugin like Elasticity or whatever. The guitars were probably ran through a program that was like Melodyne or either it's something similar to that where they're all converted to MIDI, and then you can go in there and edit it up and all clean it all out and then rerun them into a MIDI guitar program and then run that through a VST that gives you a bunch of different amp and cabinet simulators, and you probably went all that route. And then auto-tuned the shit out of every band got it. They thought it sounded great. They were really happy. So I guess that's something. That counts for something. And they went out and did the same thing. They started pushing it. They started hyping it. They started doing shows, promoting it, and doing all kinds of stuff. And then they uploaded it to more sites that were competition sites again. And nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. I mean, the thing just bombed out. Why? It was the same quality of composition. It was the same quality of lyrical content. So what happened? Why'd it fail? The only difference is that they sounded like everybody else. And when they sounded like everybody else, nobody else cared. Nobody cared to listen. It was just the same old stuff we've all heard before. They made the mistake that everybody else, or not most everybody else makes, where they just want to sound like their favorite guys, their favorite bands, their favorite groups, whatever, instead of just having their own style, their own sound. And so that's what I do to try and help people, as far as the music is concerned. I work with them to try and get an organic recording, and what I mean by that is something that's completely them. They've played every part. We didn't really have to fix anything in post. Everything that you hear is them. All I would do after that is I just run levels, set EQs, set dynamics processing, and maybe some ambient effects in there to try and liven things up or thicken things up and give you a really great sound off of your performance. But to get that sound to start with, we have to set you up in a manner that we can capture a great sound to work with. I will actually work with you to get a great sound and a great performance. It doesn't matter where we are, whether in my studio or if we go to a big studio or your rehearsal space or live on stage, I will make you sound good. The artists sound good. That's why I say I'm the best at what I do here at F Studio.